My name is Hannah, 30 years old, and today I'm sharing why I finally cut my parents out of my life. When a devastating illness left me bedridden, my mother's response shattered our relationship forever. "I didn't sign up for this," she said, choosing social obligations over her suffering daughter. Years of emotional neglect culminated in that moment of abandonment when I needed them most. Now I've built a peaceful life without their toxicity. Before I dive into this painful story, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if family healing journeys speak to you. Growing up in Maplewood, a small town in Michigan, my family looked picture perfect from the outside. My father, James, was a successful accountant at a prestigious firm working 60-hour weeks and rarely present even when physically home. My mother, Patricia, built her entire identity around social status, hosting dinner parties for the right people and volunteering for organizations that enhanced her standing in the community. Then there was my younger brother, Kyle, 3 years my junior, and the undisputed golden child of the family. From my earliest memories, I understood my place in our family hierarchy. Kyle could do no wrong while I existed in a perpetual state of not quite measuring up. I brought home straight A's throughout school, but my report cards were met with cursory nods. "That's what we expect from you, Hannah," my father would say before returning to his newspaper. Meanwhile, Kyle's C+ in math earned him celebratory ice cream and effusive praise for trying his best. I remember one particular incident when I was 14. I had spent months working on a science project about environmental conservation. It won first place at the regional competition, qualifying me for the state finals. My parents attended the regional award ceremony only because it was at our school and would look bad if we weren't there, as my mother explained. When the state competition arrived, they informed me the night before that they couldn't take me because Kyle had a baseball game. "Your brother needs our support," my mother said, straightening the collar of my father's shirt as he stood silently beside her. "You understand, right? You're always so self-sufficient." I nodded, swallowing my disappointment, and arranged a ride with my science teacher. That pattern repeated throughout my childhood. My achievements minimized my needs, deprioritized, and my feelings dismissed. My 16th birthday passed without acknowledgement because the family was attending Kyle's baseball tournament in another city. I spent the day alone, baking myself a small cake and watching old movies. When they returned home late that night, Kyle proudly displaying his participation trophy, my mother gasped as she glanced at the calendar. "Oh, Hannah was that today. Well, we'll do something next weekend." Next weekend never came. No makeup celebration, not even a belated card. Throughout my teenage years, my mother experienced bouts of depression, often retreating to her bedroom for days. During these episodes, I became both daughter and caretaker, bringing her tea, managing household responsibilities, and trying to shield Kyle from the tension. I would sit at the edge of her bed, listening to her concerns about what the neighbors might think, or how she felt judged by her friends. "You're the only one who really understands me, Hannah," she would say, gripping my hand tightly. Yet when my own anxiety began manifesting in high school panic attacks before tests, insomnia, stomach issues, she waved it off as typical teenage dramatics. "Stop looking for attention," she admonished when I asked about seeing a counselor. What would people think if they knew? The dynamics at home shaped me into a quintessential people pleaser. I became hypervigilant about others' emotions, anticipating needs before they were voiced. My own feelings were neatly compartmentalized, deemed unworthy of space or acknowledgement. This pattern followed me through college at the University of Michigan, where I pursued education, a choice my father called practical but unremarkable. After graduation, I accepted a teaching position at an elementary school in Chicago. The distance, a 5-hour drive from Maplewood, felt like breathing room. I limited visits to major holidays and occasional weekends each trip home, reinforcing my decision to maintain that boundary. In Chicago, I built a life of my own. My small apartment became a sanctuary decorated with warm colors and filled with books. A stark contrast to my parents' pristine, showroom-like home, where comfort was sacrificed for appearance. I formed genuine friendships with fellow teachers who valued me for exactly who I was. And then I met Thomas. Thomas entered my life during my second year of teaching. He was the new art teacher with kind eyes and an easy laugh that made the weight I carried feel lighter. Our relationship progressed naturally, built on mutual respect and authentic connection. The first time he joined me for a weekend visit to my parents' home, he noticed immediately what I had normalized. "Did you see how your mom interrupted you 5 times during dinner?" he asked gently as we drove back to Chicago. "And how they spent 30 minutes talking about Kyle's job promotion without asking a single question about your classroom award." His observations weren't accusatory, just clear-eyed recognition of patterns I had long accepted as normal. That weekend marked the beginning of my awakening to the true nature of my family relationships. Thomas became my mirror, reflecting back a reality I had been trained not to see. Even with this growing awareness, I maintained contact with my family. Monthly phone calls, holiday visits, birthday cards. I held on to hope that distance and time might transform our relationships into something healthier. For several years, this delicate balance worked well enough. I was building my own life while keeping the door open just enough to maintain family connections. I had no idea that a health crisis would soon force me to reevaluate everything I thought I knew about family loyalty. My life in Chicago had fallen into a comfortable rhythm. Thomas and I moved in together after a year of dating, finding a cozy 2-bedroom apartment near Humboldt Park. I had been promoted to lead teacher for the 3rd grade, a position that came with more responsibility, but also greater fulfillment. Thomas's art program was thriving, with several of his students winning citywide competitions. We talked about marriage, children, buying a home. The future stretched before us, bright with possibility. The first symptoms were easy to dismiss. Unusual fatigue that lingered beyond the normal teacher exhaustion at the end of a school year. Joint pain I attributed to increased yoga classes. Occasional brain fog that I blamed on stress and lack of sleep. But as summer break arrived, instead of recovering with rest, my symptoms intensified. "Maybe you should see a doctor," Thomas suggested one morning when he found me struggling to get out of bed, my knees stiff and painful. "This doesn't seem like normal tiredness." I reluctantly agreed, expecting a quick diagnosis of vitamin deficiency or perhaps mild anemia. The appointment with my primary care physician ended with a shrug and a recommendation for more sleep, better nutrition, and stress management techniques. Blood work came back within normal ranges, and I was sent home feeling slightly foolish for making a fuss. 2 weeks later, I collapsed in our kitchen while preparing dinner. The room had suddenly started spinning, black spots dancing across my vision as my legs gave way. Thomas found me on the floor, semi-conscious and confused. The emergency room visit resulted in more tests, more inconclusive results, and a referral to a specialist with a 3-month waiting list. 3 months, Thomas argued with the scheduling nurse. "She can barely stand some days. How is she supposed to return to teaching in September?" We used our savings to see a private specialist who ordered more extensive testing. During this time, my symptoms continued to worsen. Some days, the fatigue was so overwhelming that showering exhausted me to the point of tears. My joints burned with pain, my hands occasionally too swollen to grip properly. Cognitive issues began appearing, searching for common words, forgetting conversations we'd had the day before. I took a medical leave from teaching just as the school year was about to begin. The financial implications were immediate and severe. Thomas picked up extra art classes on weekends to help cover our mounting medical bills. Our savings dwindled rapidly as we bounced from specialist to specialist, each offering theories but no definitive answers. "We need to rule out multiple sclerosis," one neurologist said. "This presents like early lupus," suggested a rheumatologist. "Have you considered that this might be primarily stress-related?" asked another in a tone that made me question my own experiences. Through it all, Thomas remained my anchor. He attended every appointment, taking meticulous notes when my brain fog made it difficult to process information. He researched symptoms late into the night, joining online forums and reading medical journals. He adapted our apartment for days when mobility was challenging, creating a restful space in the living room so I wouldn't have to navigate stairs to our bedroom. "We're going to figure this out," he promised, holding me through nights when pain made sleep impossible. "Whatever it is, we'll face it together." After nearly 6 months of medical mystery, a new rheumatologist connected the dots. Multiple autoimmune markers, specific patterns of inflammation, distinctive antibodies present in my blood work, all pointing to a complex autoimmune condition that had been missed in earlier testing. "The good news is we know what we're dealing with now," Dr. Morrison explained. "The challenging news is that treatment will be extensive. We need to get the inflammation under control immediately and then develop a long-term management plan." The diagnosis brought relief tinged with grief. Relief at having validation that something was genuinely wrong, that I hadn't been imagining or exaggerating my symptoms. Grief at the realization that this condition was chronic, requiring lifelong management with potential flares and remissions. The treatment plan was aggressive high-dose steroids, initially followed by immunosuppressive medications with significant side effects. Physical therapy twice weekly, complete lifestyle modifications, and most importantly, a strong support system during the critical first year of treatment. "The next few months will be challenging," Dr. Morrison warned. "You'll need help with daily activities. The medications will make you more susceptible to infections, so limiting exposure to illness is crucial. And the emotional impact shouldn't be underestimated. Having people you can rely on will make a significant difference in your recovery." Thomas and I had a difficult conversation that night about our options. His teaching position couldn't sustain us financially through an extended period of my inability to work. My treatment would require frequent medical appointments that would be easier to manage with additional support, and our lease was ending in 2 months. "What if we moved back to Michigan?" I suggested reluctantly. "We could find a place near my parents. The cost of living is lower, and having family nearby would give us some backup." Thomas hesitated, his concerns about my family dynamics evident. "Are you sure they'll be supportive, based on what I've seen?" "They're my parents," I said with more conviction than I felt. "Of course they'll help when it really matters." I called my mother the next day, explaining my diagnosis and our situation. Her response was characteristically focused on appearances. "An autoimmune disease. Is it something genetic? There's nothing like that in our family," she said, as though my primary concern should be defending the family medical history. I pressed forward, explaining our plan to move closer and my need for occasional support during recovery. "Well," she said after a long pause, "I suppose we could help out sometimes. I do have my charity commitments, and your father's firm has that big merger happening, and we're helping Kyle and Amber with wedding planning, but I'm sure we can figure something out." It wasn't the enthusiastic support I had hoped for, but it seemed sufficient at the time. Thomas and I began making arrangements, finding a small, affordable apartment in a suburb 20 minutes from my parents' home. Thomas secured a teaching position at a local school, taking a significant pay cut in the process. We sold furniture to afford the moving costs, packed our life into a rental truck, and headed back to Michigan with a mixture of hope and trepidation. I believed that seeing my physical condition firsthand would awaken my mother's nurturing instincts. I thought my father's practical nature would recognize the logical need to support his daughter through illness. I hoped proximity would strengthen family bonds that distance had strained. I was wrong on every count, and the realization would come at the moment when I was least equipped to handle it. The first major disappointment came 3 weeks after our move. My condition had deteriorated significantly, a common occurrence as my body adjusted to the powerful medications. I was scheduled for an important treatment at the hospital, requiring someone to drive me home afterward since I would be heavily sedated. Thomas had an unavoidable teacher orientation that couldn't be rescheduled without risking his new position. My mother had agreed weeks in advance to drive me, marking it prominently on her calendar during our previous visit. The morning of the appointment, my phone rang. My mother's voice carried the particular tone I recognized from childhood, the one that preceded disappointment. "Hannah, something's come up with the garden club luncheon. They're short a hostess, and I simply can't let Marianne handle it alone," she explained, no trace of apology in her voice. "You can reschedule your treatment, can't you? These medications are so harsh anyway. Perhaps a break would do you good." I sat on our bed still in pajamas because dressing had become a 20-minute ordeal, requiring Thomas's help, and tried to process her casual dismissal. This wasn't a coffee date or movie night. It was medical treatment my doctors had emphasized was critical to preventing permanent joint damage. "Mom, I can't reschedule. The medication protocol is time-sensitive and the hospital has limited slots," I explained, working to keep my voice steady. "Is there any way you could go to the luncheon afterward?" "Don't be selfish, Hannah," she replied sharply. "I have responsibilities to people counting on me. Surely there's someone else you can ask." There wasn't. We had just moved back to the area and hadn't yet established new friendships or connections. After hanging up, I called the hospital in tears, explaining my situation. A compassionate nurse arranged for medical transportation, adding another expense we couldn't afford to our mounting bills. That incident set the pattern for what followed. Each request for help met with increasingly transparent excuses. My father claimed work demands prevented him from driving me to appointments, though he found time for his weekly golf game. My mother canceled plans to help with grocery shopping because Kyle and his fiancée Amber needed her input on wedding invitations. When I developed a severe infection, a common complication of my immunosuppressive medication, and called my parents from the emergency room, they were unavailable because they had spontaneously decided to take a weekend trip to their lake house. The most painful moments were often the smallest betrayals. My mother promising to bring dinner when Thomas was working late, then texting at the last minute that she was too tired. My father agreeing to help research insurance appeals for denied claims, then forgetting entirely. Each broken promise reinforcing the message my needs were inconvenient, my illness an imposition. One particularly difficult evening, Thomas had to work late supervising an art exhibition. My pain levels were high, and I hadn't been able to keep food down all day. My mother had agreed to check in on me, perhaps stay for a few hours until Thomas returned. When she hadn't arrived by 7 p.m., I called her cell phone. "Oh, Hannah," she answered, background noise suggesting she was at a restaurant. "Didn't you get my text? Patricia Williams invited us to join their table at the charity auction dinner. Last minute thing, couldn't pass it up." "I didn't get any text," I said quietly, checking my phone to confirm. "Well, I meant to send one," she replied dismissively. "You know how these things happen. You'll be fine for a few hours, won't you? You've always been so independent." 2 days later came the conversation that would ultimately sever our relationship. I had asked both my parents to come over, hoping that a direct face-to-face discussion about my needs might break through their pattern of avoidance. My father arrived alone, explaining that my mother had a hair appointment she couldn't reschedule. I sat across from him at our small dining table, my prepared notes trembling in my swollen hands. "Dad, I need to talk about how difficult things have been since we moved back. Mom and I had discussed that I would need some help during treatment, but it hasn't been working out that way." My father glanced at his watch before responding. "Your mother has a lot of commitments, Hannah. She can't just drop everything because you're feeling under the weather." "This isn't under the weather, Dad. I have a serious medical condition," I explained, frustration seeping into my voice. "Some days I can't dress myself or prepare food. The doctors say having support is critical for my recovery." He shifted uncomfortably. "Maybe you should have stayed in Chicago if you needed so much help. Your mother isn't a nurse, you know. Before I could respond, my phone rang, my mother calling. I put her on speaker so we could both participate in the conversation. Hannah, your father tells me you're complaining about our help, she began without preamble. I think you need to understand something. I didn't sign up for this. I have my own life, my own obligations. You've always been too sensitive and dramatic about everything. The words struck like physical blows. Dramatic, Mom? I'm sick. This isn't something I'm making up or exaggerating. Well, you've always had a flair for the theatrical, she continued. First, it was anxiety in high school, now this mysterious illness that none of the doctors can seem to agree on. Have you considered that this might be psychological depression, can manifest physically, you know? I looked to my father, hoping for some defense, some acknowledgement of the reality of my condition. He sat silently, eyes fixed on the table. Later that week, I overheard my mother on the phone with her friend while she thought I was resting in the bedroom during one of her rare visits. No, I can't make the fundraiser. Yes, I'm at Hannah's again. Between us, I think it's mostly depression. She always did need more attention than Kyle. The doctors are just giving her what she wants with all these treatments. That night, I broke down completely. The physical pain of my condition paled in comparison to the emotional agony of having my suffering dismissed by the people who should have cared most. Thomas held me as I sobbed, my body shaking with grief and anger. I can't do this anymore, I whispered. I can't keep hoping they'll suddenly become the parents I need. It's making me sicker, Thomas. The stress, the disappointment, the constant rejection, it's making everything worse. Thomas stroked my hair gently. Then stop trying. We'll figure out another way. You don't deserve this, Hannah. That conversation marked the beginning of my acceptance that the supportive family I had imagined when moving back to Michigan simply didn't exist. And as that reality sank in, my health continued its downward spiral. I'll never forget the night everything changed. Thomas was working late again, picking up extra hours to compensate for our financial strain. My fever had been climbing all afternoon, joint pains so severe, I could barely shift position on the couch. When my temperature hit 103 and I began experiencing confusion, I knew something was dangerously wrong. I called Thomas, who immediately left work, but he was 30 minutes away. Then, despite everything, I called my parents. My father answered. Dad, I said, voice weak and shaking. I need help. My fever's really high, and I think I need to go to the emergency room. Thomas is still at work. Have you taken Tylenol? He asked, television audible in the background. Yes, hours ago. It's not helping. Please, Dad. I'm scared. There was a pause, muffled conversation with my mother. Then, your mother says to call an ambulance if it's that serious. We're in the middle of dinner guests right now. I hung up without responding, tears mingling with sweat as I curled into myself, trying to manage both the physical pain and the fresh wound of abandonment. Thomas arrived home to find me semi-conscious and immediately rushed me to the emergency room. In the harsh hospital lights drifting in and out of awareness, as medical staff worked around me, I had a moment of complete clarity. The fever had triggered a serious flare of my condition, inflammation attacking my joints and organs. But as IV medications slowly brought the crisis under control, I realized something had broken permanently within me, the last thread of hope that my parents would ever be the support system I needed. Early the next morning, still in the hospital, I was surprised by an unexpected visitor. Not my parents, but Judith Thomas's mother. She bustled into the room carrying a small suitcase, her face lined with concern. Thomas called us last night, she explained, coming immediately to my bedside and gently taking my hand. We were on the first flight out this morning. Robert's parking the car now. The simple act of Thomas's parents flying across the country on a moment's notice when my own parents living 20 minutes away couldn't be bothered to interrupt dinner crystallized everything. Judith smoothed my hair back from my forehead with maternal tenderness. a gesture so foreign yet so desperately needed that it broke something open inside me. "We've been so worried." She continued, setting up the items she'd brought: comfortable pajamas, my favorite herbal tea. Thomas must have mentioned a soft blanket from home. "Thomas has kept us updated on your condition, but seeing you in person, you poor thing, you've been through so much." Robert arrived shortly after, carrying flowers and a stack of magazines. Unlike my own father's uncomfortable hovering on his rare hospital visits, Thomas's father sat confidently by my bedside, asking intelligent questions about my treatment plan when the doctor arrived. "We're going to stay for a couple of weeks," Judith announced. "Help get you back on your feet and give Thomas some support too. He's been trying to do everything himself, that boy." For the first time in months, I felt the crushing weight of managing my illness lighten slightly. Judith took charge of coordinating my medications, preparing nutrient-dense meals that I could actually tolerate, and creating a restful environment for recovery. Robert drove me to appointments, waiting patiently and taking notes. Together, they created a buffer of care that allowed Thomas to maintain his teaching position without constant worry. Their matter-of-fact assistance, offered without hesitation or expectation of gratitude, stood in stark contrast to my own parents' continuous stream of excuses. My mother called once during my hospital stay, her primary concern being what I might have told the medical staff about family medical history. She didn't visit, explaining that hospitals triggered her anxiety. As my physical health slowly stabilized under proper care, I began addressing my emotional health as well. Judith found a therapist specializing in chronic illness, who offered telehealth appointments, making sessions possible even on days when leaving home was too difficult. Dr. Larson helped me understand the patterns that had defined my family relationships throughout my life. We discussed the emotional neglect that had been normalized, the scapegoat role I had occupied in contrast to Kyle's golden child position, and how these dynamics had shaped my self-perception. "What you're describing is a common family system in homes with narcissistic parents," she explained during one particularly revelatory session. "The different roles assigned to children, the conditional love based on meeting parental needs rather than the other way around." With this new framework, memories from throughout my life clicked into place. The birthday celebrations that happened only when they aligned with my mother's social calendar. The achievements acknowledged only when they reflected well on my parents. The emotional support that flowed one direction from me to them, never reciprocated. 2 weeks into my therapy, bolstered by improved physical health and growing clarity, I attempted one more honest conversation with my mother. Thomas's parents had returned home, but their support had given me strength I hadn't possessed before. "Mom," I began when she answered my call. "I need to talk to you about something important." "Can it wait?" "I'm heading to lunch with the committee," she replied. "No, it can't wait. This is about our relationship and the lack of support during my illness." Her sigh was audible. "Hannah, we've been through this. Your father and I have our own lives. We can't drop everything because you're not feeling well." "This isn't about not feeling well. I was hospitalized with a serious flare of a chronic condition. You didn't even visit." "Hospitals are depressing," she said dismissively. "Besides, Thomas was there. What did you need me for?" The question hung between us, so revealing in its casual cruelty. What did I need my mother for during a medical crisis? The fact that she couldn't understand the answer told me everything. "I needed my mom," I said simply. "I needed to know you cared." "Of course I care," she snapped. "But this constant neediness has always been your problem, Hannah. First with the anxiety as a teenager, now with whatever this is. Have you considered that all this attention-seeking behavior might be why Thomas is pulling away?" The accusation was so wildly inaccurate. Thomas had been my unwavering support that it momentarily stunned me. But it also confirmed what my therapist had suggested: my mother was incapable of seeing me as a person with legitimate needs separate from her narrative. "Mom, Thomas isn't pulling away. His parents flew across the country to help us because you and Dad wouldn't drive 20 minutes. Well, if you're just calling to criticize me and compare me to Thomas's mother, this conversation is over," she huffed. That was the moment I knew. The relationship I had spent 30 years trying to salvage wasn't just damaged, it was fundamentally incapable of providing what every child deserves from their parents' unconditional love, support, and basic care during times of vulnerability. As I hung up the phone, a strange sense of peace settled over me. The decision that had been forming through months of disappointment and rejection crystallized into certainty. For my health, both physical and emotional, I needed to distance myself from the toxic dynamics that had defined my family relationships. The path forward wasn't about convincing my parents to change or making one more attempt at explaining my needs. It was about accepting their limitations and choosing my own well-being, even if that meant walking away from the family I had been born into. The decision to establish boundaries with my parents wasn't made in anger, though certainly there was hurt and disappointment involved. It came from a place of self-preservation and ultimately self-respect. After consulting with my therapist, I decided that a clear written communication would be the most effective approach, allowing me to express myself fully without interruption or manipulation. I spent several days composing a letter, writing and rewriting until it reflected my truth without unnecessary cruelty. I wanted to be honest about the impact of their behavior while avoiding blame that would only trigger defensiveness. "Dear Mom and Dad," I began. "I'm writing to let you know that I need to take some time away from our relationship. My health crisis has made it clear that our family dynamic is not supportive in the way I need right now, and the stress of managing your expectations alongside my illness is making my recovery more difficult. I'm not writing to ask you to change or to list the ways you've hurt me. I accept that you have your own limitations and perspectives. This isn't about punishment, but about creating the healthy environment I need to heal. I won't be in contact for the foreseeable future. I ask that you respect this boundary by not calling, visiting, or sending messages through others. If there's a genuine emergency, you can contact Thomas. I hope you understand this isn't a decision I've made lightly. Perhaps with time and distance, we can establish a healthier relationship. For now, though, I need to focus entirely on my health and recovery. Hannah." I mailed the letter rather than delivering it in person or sending it electronically, wanting to avoid an immediate confrontational response. 3 days later, I received a brief email from my father. "Hannah, we received your letter. While we don't agree with your characterization of events, we will respect your request for space. Your mother is understandably upset. If you reconsider, we are still your parents. Dad." No acknowledgement of my illness or the lack of support. No expression of love or concern for my well-being. Just a businesslike acceptance tinged with the implication that I was being unreasonable. My mother's response came a week later in the form of a 3-page handwritten letter, the elegant script belying the emotional manipulation contained within. "I cannot believe the ingratitude you've shown after everything we've done for you. We gave you every advantage, supported your education, welcomed you back to Michigan when you needed help. Now you repay us with this cruel abandonment. What will I tell our friends? How will I explain why my daughter has cut me out of her life? The shame and embarrassment you've caused is immeasurable." The letter continued in this vein, focused entirely on her feelings, her reputation, her suffering, with not a single inquiry about my health or recognition of my needs. It was perhaps unintentionally the most perfect validation of my decision I could have received. What I hadn't anticipated was the ripple effect through extended family. Within days of establishing my boundary, the calls began. "Aunt Susan, your mother is absolutely devastated. She cries every time your name is mentioned. Can't you find it in your heart to forgive whatever minor disagreement you've had? Uncle David, family is everything, Hannah. You'll regret this decision when you're older. No matter what happened, you don't turn your back on blood. Cousin Jennifer. I don't know what's going on between you and Aunt Patricia, but she's telling everyone you've had some kind of mental breakdown. Is that true? Should we be worried? Each call required careful navigation. I didn't want to drag extended family into the situation or speak negatively about my parents, but I also refused to accept the narrative being created. "This is a personal health decision made with my doctor's support," became my standard response. "I'm focusing on recovery right now and need to limit stressful relationships." The most complicated relationship to navigate was with my brother Kyle. He called shortly after receiving an emotional account from our mother. "Hannah, what the hell?" he began, anger evident in his voice. "Mom's falling apart. Dad's barely speaking. What's this about you cutting them off?" I took a deep breath. "Kyle, this isn't a decision I made lightly. It's about my health." "But they're our parents," he insisted. "Whatever happened, you work through it. That's what family does." "That's the thing," I said quietly. "They haven't been working through anything with me. When I was hospitalized, they didn't come. When I needed basic help during treatment, they had excuses. It's been a pattern my whole life, Kyle. Maybe your experience has been different." There was a long silence on the line. "They've always been there for me," he finally said, his voice uncertain. "I know," I replied without bitterness, "and I'm glad for that. But they haven't been there for me, and right now that's not something I can keep pretending isn't true." Kyle's position remained complicated. Caught between loyalty to our parents and genuine concern for me, he initially tried to serve as a mediator. "They could change," he suggested during one call. "If you explained exactly what you needed." "I've been explaining for months," I told him gently. "The problem isn't lack of understanding, it's lack of willingness." As weeks passed, Kyle began seeing the situation more clearly. During a visit to my apartment, he witnessed firsthand my mother's behavior when she called my phone, which he answered, and launched into a 20-minute monologue about her suffering without once asking how I was doing. After hanging up, he sat in stunned silence. "Has it always been like that?" he asked. "Pretty much," I confirmed. "You just didn't notice because it wasn't directed at you." The social media fallout was another unexpected challenge. My mother began posting vague but pointed references to ungrateful children and the pain of parental rejection. Friends and acquaintances who knew us both sent confused messages trying to understand the sudden family drama playing out in thinly veiled Facebook posts. Holding someone's hand through every life challenge only to be discarded when they decide you're no longer useful. The heartbreak only a mother could understand. Read one particularly theatrical post accompanied by a stock photo of a woman gazing sadly through a rainy window. I maintained digital silence, neither responding to her posts nor creating my own counter-narrative. The temptation to defend myself was strong, but my therapist reminded me that public validation wasn't the goal my health and peace were. One of the most challenging aspects of setting this boundary was confronting the deeply ingrained societal expectation that family relationships should be maintained at all costs. "But they're your parents," became a refrain I heard repeatedly, as though that biological connection automatically earned unlimited chances to cause harm. I found support in unexpected places. A support group for adult children of emotionally neglectful parents provided community with others who understood the complex grief of mourning the relationship you wished you had, while accepting the reality of what actually existed. My therapist validated the difficult choice I had made. "Relationships should be mutual," she explained. "When they consistently take more than they give, when they damage rather than nurture, it's not only acceptable, but sometimes necessary to create distance." Thomas and his family formed a protective circle around me, demonstrating daily what healthy family dynamics looked like. His parents called regularly, sent care packages, and visited when possible, all without expectation or obligation. The most surprising outcome was the impact on my physical health. As the emotional stress decreased, my body began responding better to treatments. My rheumatologist noted measurable improvements in inflammatory markers. Flare-ups became less frequent and severe. The connection between emotional well-being and physical health became undeniably clear. 6 months after sending that letter, I faced my first holiday season without contact with my parents. Thanksgiving had always been spent at their house Christmas morning, opening presents under their carefully decorated tree. There was sadness in letting go of those traditions, even though the reality never matched the Hallmark card image I had wanted to believe in. Instead, Thomas and I created new traditions. We hosted a Friendsgiving with colleagues from his school and neighbors from our apartment complex. We decorated our small home with ornaments chosen for meaning rather than matching a color scheme. We volunteered serving meals at a community center on Christmas Day. For the first time, the holiday season felt genuinely joyful rather than an exercise in meeting impossible expectations. I wasn't anxiously anticipating criticism about my contributions to the meal, or bracing for subtle comments about my appearance or life choices. I was simply present, grateful, and increasingly at peace with my decision. The path of setting boundaries is rarely straight or smooth. There were days I questioned myself, nights I cried for the parents I wished I had rather than the ones I was given. But with each passing month, the fog of guilt and obligation lifted further, revealing the clear certainty that protecting my well-being wasn't selfish. It was essential. As the 6-month mark of no contact approached, I found myself in a remarkably different place, both physically and emotionally. My treatment plan had stabilized with medications adjusted to minimize side effects while controlling inflammation. Physical therapy had restored much of my mobility, and I had begun teaching part-time at a local community college, finding joy in education again, without the exhaustion of full-time elementary school work. The most profound changes, however, were internal. Therapy had helped me recognize and begin dismantling the core beliefs instilled throughout my childhood that my needs were secondary, that love was conditional, that I was somehow fundamentally flawed or undeserving. These realizations didn't come easily, each one required confronting painful memories and ingrained patterns. The goal isn't to erase your past, my therapist explained during one particularly difficult session. It's to understand how it shaped you and choose which parts you want to carry forward. I found unexpected allies in this healing journey. Thomas's parents continued their steadfast support, demonstrating what healthy parental love looked like. But perhaps the most surprising connection came from my father's sister, Aunt Catherine. She called about 7 months into my no-contact decision, her voice hesitant. "Hannah, it's your Aunt Catherine. I hope it's okay that I'm calling. Kyle gave me your number." I hadn't been close with Catherine growing up. She lived in Colorado and visited only occasionally. During those visits, I'd noticed tension between her and my mother. But as a child, I hadn't understood the dynamics at play. "Of course it's okay," I assured her. "How are you?" "I'm well," she said, then paused before continuing. "Hannah, Kyle mentioned you've stepped back from contact with your parents. I want you to know. I understand." What followed was a conversation that illuminated generations of family patterns I had never known about. Catherine shared her own experiences growing up with my grandmother, a woman whose narcissistic behaviors had deeply affected my father, and by extension, shaped his inability to protect me from similar treatment by my mother. "Your father learned early that the path of least resistance was to accommodate, to never challenge," Catherine explained. "He watched our father do the same with our mother. It became his survival strategy." This insight didn't excuse my father's failure to support me, but it provided context that helped me release some of the personal hurt. The patterns hadn't started with me, they were handed down generation to generation like toxic heirlooms. Catherine became a regular presence in my life, calling weekly and visiting when her work as a consultant brought her to the Midwest. She shared family stories I'd never heard, photos from my father's childhood, pieces of history that helped complete the puzzle of my family dynamics. "Breaking the cycle is the hardest thing," she told me during one visit, squeezing my hand. "I did it by moving across the country. You're doing it by setting boundaries. But it's the bravest thing any of us can do." As my support network expanded, I found community with others who had similar experiences. An online forum for people with autoimmune conditions introduced me to Mia, who lived just 30 minutes away and had also experienced family abandonment during her health crisis. Our coffee meetups became healing sessions of mutual understanding without explanation. My friend circle shifted during this period. Some relationships couldn't withstand the weight of chronic illness and family drama. "Let me know when things get back to normal," one former friend texted after canceling plans for the third time. Other friendships deepened, the people who showed up consistently, proving their value in my life. About 8 months into my no-contact decision, my father reached out directly for the first time. His email was brief but represented a significant departure from his usual communication style. "Hannah, I've been thinking about our situation. I miss having you in my life. Would you consider meeting for coffee sometime, just the two of us? Dad." After discussing it with my therapist, I agreed to a brief meeting at a neutral coffee shop. I arrived with clear boundaries and realistic expectations, not hoping for a dramatic transformation, but open to the possibility of a new kind of relationship if he was genuinely willing to acknowledge the past and commit to change. Our conversation was awkward at first, both of us unsure how to bridge the months of silence. My father looked older, the lines around his eyes more pronounced. He asked about my health with what seemed like genuine concern, listening attentively to my explanation of my treatment progress. When the conversation inevitably turned to my mother and the no-contact decision, however, the familiar patterns reemerged. "Your mother is still very hurt," he began. "She feels you've misunderstood her intentions." "Dad," I interrupted gently. "I didn't come here to discuss Mom's feelings about my boundaries. I came to see if you and I could establish a different kind of relationship, one based on mutual respect." He seemed genuinely confused by this concept. "But we're family. That means supporting each other no matter what." "That's exactly the point," I explained. "The support wasn't mutual. It flowed one direction from me to you and Mom. When I needed support during the worst health crisis of my life, it wasn't there." "We did the best we could," he insisted, falling back on the familiar defense. I took a deep breath. "I believe you did the best you knew how to do, but it wasn't what I needed, and I'm not willing to pretend otherwise anymore." We parted without resolution, the brief reconnection making clear that while my father missed the idea of having a daughter, he wasn't prepared to do the work required to build a healthy relationship. My mother remained steadfast in her position that she had done nothing wrong and deserved an apology from me. This attempted reconciliation, while unsuccessful, provided unexpected clarity. I had feared that my decision to create distance was motivated by anger rather than self-protection. The interaction confirmed that the dynamics remained unchanged, validating my boundary as necessary rather than punitive. Around this time, Thomas and I reached a significant milestone in our relationship. After supporting each other through the challenges of my illness and family estrangement, he proposed during a quiet evening at home. The moment was perfectly aligned with our relationship, genuine, without pretense, focused on our connection rather than external validation. With Thomas's encouragement, I began looking toward the future rather than remaining focused on healing the past. We purchased a small house with a garden where I could grow vegetables and flowers, the nurturing of living things becoming a form of therapy in itself. The process of creating a home that felt genuinely safe and welcoming became symbolic of the internal work I had done. Just as we were settling into our new home, unexpected news arrived that would challenge and ultimately strengthen my resolve to maintain healthy boundaries. After experiencing unusual symptoms and visiting my doctor, I discovered I was pregnant. The emotions were complicated, joy mixed with anxiety about how pregnancy might affect my autoimmune condition, excitement about building our family alongside lingering grief about my own. My medical team worked closely with me to adjust medications and create a monitoring plan that would protect both my health and the pregnancy. The support I received from healthcare providers Thomas, his family, and my chosen circle of friends stood in stark contrast to what I had experienced during my initial diagnosis. This new chapter brought its own challenges around family boundaries. Well-meaning friends suggested that becoming a parent might be the perfect opportunity to reconcile with my parents. "Your baby deserves to know their grandparents," one friend commented, unaware of how deeply that statement minimized my experience. "My baby deserves to be surrounded by people who model healthy, respectful relationships," I responded firmly. "That's the priority." The pregnancy journey reinforced my commitment to breaking generational patterns. As I connected with the new life growing inside me, I made promises about the kind of parent I would strive to be present, responsive, validating all the things I had needed and not received. The responsibility was sobering, but also empowering. "You're already a better mother than I ever had," I told my rounded belly one night as Thomas and I lay in bed. "Because I'm thinking about what you need rather than what I need from you." Thomas squeezed my hand. "We're going to make mistakes," he said realistically. "But there'll be new mistakes, not the same ones passed down. That's what matters." As my body changed to accommodate our growing child, I felt a deepening commitment to protecting the boundaries I had established. This wasn't just about my well-being anymore. It was about creating a healthy environment for the next generation, ensuring my child wouldn't inherit the legacy of emotional neglect that had shaped so much of my life. The decision to maintain distance from my parents while preparing to become a parent myself wasn't easy or straightforward. There were moments of doubt, nights spent wondering if I was making the right choice, days when pregnancy hormones amplified the grief of family estrangement. But beneath these temporary waves of emotion remained the solid foundation of self-respect I had built during my healing journey. This foundation would be tested in ways I couldn't yet imagine as my due date approached and the reality of becoming a mother myself drew nearer. The final stage of my journey would require confronting the most fundamental question: what does family truly mean, and who gets to define it? 2 years have passed since I made the difficult decision to step back from my relationship with my parents. My daughter Lily is now 14 months old, taking wobbly steps across our living room floor, her determined expression reminding me at times of my own reflection. Her arrival brought clarity to questions I had wrestled with throughout my healing journey, questions about family obligation and the courage to choose differently than what was modeled for me. My physical health has stabilized into what my doctors call managed remission. The autoimmune condition remains part of my daily reality, requiring ongoing medication and monitoring, but the debilitating flares have become rare. I've returned to teaching part-time at the community college, finding renewed purpose in education, while maintaining the flexibility my health and family needs require. The journey to this place of relative peace wasn't linear. There were setbacks and difficult moments that tested my resolve. One particularly challenging time came shortly after Lily's birth, when my mother made an unexpected attempt to reinsert herself into my life. A large flower arrangement arrived at the hospital the day after Lily was born, the card reading, simply, "Congratulations on your daughter. I know you'll be a wonderful mother. Love, Mom." The gesture arriving after nearly 2 years of no contact, except through third parties, sparked a complex storm of emotions. Appreciation for the acknowledgement mixed with wariness about the timing and motivation. 2 days later, as Thomas was helping us settle at home, the doorbell rang. My mother stood on our porch, another gift in hand. her expression a carefully constructed mask of benign grandmotherly concern. "I just want to see my granddaughter," she said when Thomas hesitated at the door. "Surely you can't keep a grandmother from meeting her only grandchild." Thomas, protective as always, gently explained that this wasn't the appropriate time for an unexpected visit. "Hannah is recovering from childbirth and needs rest. Any visits need to be arranged in advance." "This is ridiculous," my mother declared, her composure slipping. "I have rights as a grandmother." The confrontation, though brief, was deeply unsettling during what should have been a peaceful bonding time with my newborn. After discussing the situation with my therapist, I decided to send a clear, direct email establishing boundaries. "Mom, I appreciate the flowers and your congratulations. However, showing up unannounced at our home was not appropriate. If we are to have any relationship moving forward, it needs to be built on mutual respect and clear boundaries. This would include no unannounced visits, no sharing photos or information about Lily on social media, no undermining my parenting decisions, and most importantly, acknowledgement of past patterns that led to our estrangement. If you're interested in building a new kind of relationship based on these boundaries, I'm open to slow, gradual steps, starting with email communication. If not, I ask that you respect our family's privacy." Her response came quickly and revealed that fundamental patterns remained unchanged. "I cannot believe you would place conditions on a grandmother's love. After everything I've sacrificed for you, this is how you repay me. I'm only trying to love my granddaughter, and you're using her as a weapon to punish me for imagined slights. When you come to your senses, you know where to find me." The email confirmed what part of me had already known, that genuine change hadn't occurred, that the interest in Lily was an extension of my mother's need for a specific role and image rather than authentic connection. My father remained silent throughout this exchange, his absence as telling as my mother's words. This experience, while painful, reinforced the rightness of the boundaries I had established. As Lily grew from newborn to infant to toddler, I watched for any signs that my decision was negatively impacting her. What I observed instead was a child thriving in an environment of consistent love and emotional safety. Thomas proved to be the father I'd always hoped he would be: present, engaged, and tuned to Lily's needs rather than his own. His parents embraced their grandparent role with joy, but also respect for our boundaries as parents. They visited regularly, but never overstayed, offered advice when asked, but never imposed, and demonstrated what healthy family relationships could look like. My brother Kyle's place in our lives evolved in unexpected ways. After initially struggling with his role in the family system, he began his own journey of understanding, prompted partly by preparing to become a father himself. His wife Amber's pregnancy, coming 6 months after Lily's birth, created an opportunity for deeper connection between us. "I want my kid to know their cousin," he told me during a visit where he held Lily with evident affection. "And I want to get this right. I've been thinking a lot about how we grew up, and I don't want to repeat those patterns." Kyle and I established our own relationship separate from our parents and rooted in mutual respect rather than shared family obligation. He maintained contact with our parents, but set his own boundaries, particularly around how they would interact with his son when he arrived. "They don't understand why I'm making such a big deal about certain things," he confessed during one conversation. "Mom thinks I'm being influenced by you when I ask her not to post pictures of Jackson online without permission." "You're being influenced by becoming a parent and wanting to protect your child," I corrected gently. "That's exactly as it should be." Our children's cousin relationship became one of the unexpected gifts of this journey, Lily and Jackson forming a bond that represented healing rather than repetition of past patterns. The family I created around Lily extended far beyond biological connections. Mia from my autoimmune support group became Aunt Mia, her weekly visits a cherished part of our routine. Colleagues from the community college formed a network of care and support. Thomas's wide circle of friends brought diverse perspectives and experiences into Lily's life. Aunt Catherine remained a consistent presence, sharing family stories that helped me separate the generational patterns from my own self-worth. "You're rewriting the story," she told me during her last visit, watching Lily build a tower of blocks with focused determination. Every time you respond to her with patience instead of dismissal, every time you validate her feelings instead of minimizing them, you're creating a new legacy. Looking back on the difficult decision to distance myself from my parents, I recognize now that it wasn't really about cutting them off. It was about making room for health, for authentic connections, for the family I was creating rather than the one I was born into. The boundary wasn't a wall, but a filter designed to keep harmful patterns from continuing into the next generation. Forgiveness has come gradually, not as a dramatic moment of reconciliation, but as a quiet release of expectations. I've forgiven my parents not because they've acknowledged the hurt or made amends, but because carrying anger and resentment serves no purpose in the life I'm building. I understand now that they were shaped by their own experiences, limited by their own wounds and unmet needs. This forgiveness doesn't require reconciliation. I can wish them well while maintaining the boundaries that protect my family's well-being. I can honor the good they did manage to provide while acknowledging the essential nurturing that was missing. I can be grateful for the life they gave me while choosing a different path for the life I'm creating. The peace I've found isn't perfect or complete. There are still difficult days, still moments when a mother's voice in a grocery store catches me off guard. Still holidays when the absence of certain relationships feels particularly acute. But beneath these occasional waves of grief lies a foundation of certainty that choosing health over obligation, authenticity over appearance, and boundaries over inherited patterns was the most loving choice I could have made, not just for myself, but for my daughter. Family, I've learned, isn't defined by DNA or legal ties. It's created through consistent care, mutual respect, and genuine love. It's built in ordinary moments, Thomas reading bedtime stories to Lily friends, gathering around our table for Sunday dinners, my brother carefully teaching his son and niece to be kind to each other during playdates. As I watch Lily grow secure in her world of reliable love, I see the legacy of my decision reflected in her confident exploration, her trust that her needs will be met, her certainty that she is valued simply for existing. In her, I see the cycle broken and a new pattern established, one that I hope she'll carry forward when she creates her own definition of family someday. What would I say to someone facing a similar decision about family relationships? That sometimes the most loving choice isn't the easiest one. That healing doesn't always look like reconciliation. That creating boundaries isn't selfish but necessary for breaking harmful cycles. And most importantly, that family is something you can build by choice, not just inherit by chance. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision to protect your well-being, even when others didn't understand? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments. If my story resonated with you, please consider subscribing and sharing it with someone who might need to hear that prioritizing their health isn't selfish, it's essential. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that healing is possible even when the path looks different than expected.